And then if it doesn't work, you will give them some time of 3 to 4 weeks. You will repeat the same procedure for the next 2 or 3 times. And if it doesn't really work, you finally declare failure, non-separation. Okay, we definitely have to address the non-separation as well. So basically this is remodeling, not fracture. Again, let's take a little more step to a darker side. We know that, to be honest with you, we know that RP has a lot of failure. What was your record so far? How about 80% success? How about 70% success? How about 90% success? Are you satisfied with the number? Even if it's 90% success, you still have to address 10% failure. That will ruin your life. Is that correct? How come all of a sudden the highlight? What's that supposed to mean? I was going to talk about dark side. It's not supposed to bright like this. Dim it down, please. So the success rate, again, to our surprise, was only 61%, especially in male, 94% among females. So there was obviously some gender difference. And this number is really frustrating. 61%, even late teenage, early 20s among males. Oh my God, so what am I supposed to do? Was there any gender difference? And this is a part of an article published in the World Federation of Orthodontists. Like I told you, 8 specimens from cadaver, aged 70 to 80, and there were 5 male and 3 female. This is obliteration number. High peak means high number of obliteration point, ankylosis point. And I don't know, there was broad spectrum of the suture fusion, broad spectrum. From the front to the back. This is a mid-palatal suture. From the front to the back. We examined like 1,000 slices for a single specimen because we had to. It's a long segment of 7 to 8 centimeter, and each slice is just around 20 micron, 30 micron. So we'll have to end up with 1,000 specimens to really examine all the way from the front to the back. And there was no such a thing as gender difference. So we don't know. There was just a little bit of tendency that the male has a little bit high obliteration index than the female. So it has something to do with the gender difference. And obviously, I have to tell you, this is very much different from very famous article. Because the suture fusion is all around entire suture area, and there's no such a stereotype suture fusion like you see in here. There's no such a thing as a stage D or stage E. One thing is, unless you take a micro CT of a human specimen, you are not able to define suture fusion just like that, because the CBCT is only available for broad imaging. And then in here, they said under the age of 30, stage D and E consist of 90% of a whole specimen, meaning that we are not able to split up the suture in 90% of our samples. It doesn't make sense. We had a success in 90% of our samples in the opposite. So this is not adequate. And we published another article in the Seminars on Orthodontics. We're still working on it, but to make sure there obviously is some gender difference, some regulating factor between man and woman. I think this has a lot to do with estrogen. So at least as of now, what we can do is to describe, okay, there's a gender difference. We don't know why. Man has a much less success rate than female. And I think that has something, instead of a bone stiffness, it has something to do with the hormonal regulation. So it is possible that men male patient would have higher obliteration than female. So then we still have to think about how to maximize success. Okay, let's give a more force. Let's try to recruit bigger meniscrew. How about bicortical? How about tricortical? I don't know. Dr. Cha, Jung-Myeol Cha, published an article, very interesting article, using the clinical samples. They recruited 32 patients, and in one group, they used long meniscrew. In the other group, they used short meniscrew. What about the suture separation? Like in the first research outcome that I introduced to you, suture opening did not show any difference between these two groups. And also, in average, I mean, this is ridiculous. Long group had apparently low success rate, but there was no statistical difference between these two groups. So I have to say there's no difference in terms of the success rate of suture separation, even if you use a long meniscrew or short meniscrew. That's one thing. And I explained this so many times. Unlike our expectation, if we do this finite element study, and when we examine 3 different types of expander, the greatest force distribution was found in tooth-borne RP group. I was expecting something else, but this is what we found. But on the other side, if you turn it upside down, just because there was like I told you, huge side effect on the buccal plate, tooth-borne RP is not readily recommended for expansion in adults, which is why we have to end up with a MARPE. So I would compare this to Chinese chopstick or Vietnamese chopstick, which has a junction up on the top. If you want to split up the suture, basically you have to grab the distal part instead of the proximal part to be able to create huge bending moment along the line. There's a lot of people who keep saying you have to place the meniscrew, you have to place the Hyrax expander close to the center of resistance, which is not right from my understanding of biomechanics. And in our additional study, we increased the strength of the tooth supporting arm, and the stress level went up accordingly. We also increased the dimension of the meniscrew in the same finite element model, which didn't seem to make any change. So even if you increase the meniscrew dimension, it doesn't seem to be effective. So from now on, I would advise you not to use this thing. What is that? Bicortical? It's oral nasal fistula. One day, patient came to me with a MARPE installed just like that, and I removed that, and the patient says, wow, water is going to my nose. My speed is going up to my nose. Wow, that's a serious medical condition. So it is no use placing the mega-sized screw in the paper-thin area. On the side, it's paper-thin. Have a look at the mini screw, just like that. Do you think it will be functional or effective? There's no point. And it causes oral nasal fistula. There's even more crazy guy out there who keeps talking about the oral nasal brain penetration to be able to maximize the maxillary separation. Does it make sense? I don't think so. Rule number 5, tooth supporting arms must be sturdy. How can you secure support for meniscrew regardless of depth of the palatal vault? We developed this design on the top some years ago to be able to secure the placement of the meniscrew regardless of the palatal vault shape, depth, and everything. But that increases the volume of the expander itself. So in order to prevent this from happening, one of the companies in Korea came up with this idea. How about leave the meniscrew, some part of the meniscrew on top of the bone, but the rest of the meniscrew can be supported by some structure that we call piston. So this way, the piston can be movable up and down. And regardless of the length of the miniscrew, some part of the miniscrew will still remain in the bone. What we need is only 5 to 6 millimeter in the bone. It doesn't have to be 10 millimeter. It doesn't have to be 12, 13 millimeter. So even if we use the 10 millimeter miniscrew, the rest of the 5 to 6 millimeter will remain in the bone. That's what we need because they are not supposed to play a central role for maxillary expansion. So this was the idea. Anteroposteriorly shrunk down, small volume, and elevation to facilitate the self-activation of the jack screw with a conspire angle wrench. And the jack screw body can be close to the bottom and can go up depending on the depth of the portal vault. But then again, regardless of the portal vault shape, we can still install the miniscrew, and no matter what, the rest of the 5 to 6 millimeter miniscrew will remain in the bone. And then, well, this is a clever idea to enable self-activation of the jack screw expander. Okay, this is more important now. This is something I didn't really figure out for the past 20 years. Because the companies don't reveal their material property. Based on our research, I constantly keep nagging on them to produce some expander with the higher strength of the tooth supporting arm rather than miniscrew itself. And then recently we figured out that this is the idea. I figured out that one of the companies that I'm working with, they use a very soft stainless steel. So I told them, I'm going to need a little bit stronger arm. And then finally they made up this product with a little bit hard type stainless steel, which has a high yield strength, high elastic modulus. And this is where we are, 28-year-old man. Success. 27-year-old man, success. 30 man, success. Another 28, success. So, after all, we reached a certain point where we have almost more than 90% success, regardless of the gender. Of course, there still may be some gender difference yet, but this number, 97%, is much higher than the previous 79%. So I'm pretty much satisfied with the result. And more recently, before I came here, I had to use the expander in this 57-year-old man, just because he didn't have the space for the central incisor to install dental implant. And we gained success. By what? I don't know. I don't think I have produced a much heavier force or something like that. And because we use a reinforced mechanical property on the tooth supporting arm, not necessarily the size of the miniscrew, we just use a regular size of miniscrew. Just because we are running out of time, I'm not going to share with a video clip. The thing is, basically, using the piston, the insertion procedure is very simple. Because the piston works as a guidance for the installation of the miniscrew. It has a length of 5 to 6 millimeters, so it has a pretty much dimension so as to guide your miniscrew regardless of the technique you're going to use. So it's simple. So finally, let me propose some of the clinical application of this new device. Just because it's small, installation is easy. You can easily install it in children, adults, regardless of age, regardless of the gender. Now the situation was, he was an 8-year-old boy who has some situation just like that. If we don't do anything, you will end up with a serious problem because the canine resorbing the root of the lateral incisor. Something has to be done. First thing is a space creation. Second thing is we also have to address the molar relationship. How about distal jet? How about headgear? How about pendulum? How about something else? We expand, and then we install another TP bar, to be able to visualize the whole thing all at the same time. All at the same time. So without patient compliance, we were able to expand the maxilla and gain some space and also improve the molar relationship at the same time. So we saved the canine in this way in less than 10 months of time. And we did not make the profile worse because he had a very, very marginal profile to start with. So this is something that we can do. And also in this 14-year-old man who needs a little more maxillary protraction and also expansion because the posterior crossbite, we want to address both things all at the same time. The front arms can be bent between the central and lateral incisor and canine to be able to expand the maxilla and protract the maxilla all at the same time. This way you don't need the mini plate. This gives you a pure skeletal effect. So this is an example of a clinical application of the newly designed bone expander. We still have to address the last part, which is failure. Failure. Here's a 20-year-old man, class 3. Terrible crowding. We basically have to expand the maxilla. Let me tell you, do you think I'm going to show you success of the maxillary expansion? No, I'm human. I experience failure of this maxillary expansion exactly the same way you experience. Failed. What am I supposed to do? Just because we need as much as a 10mm expansion, we were obliged to try SARP. Then we know we're not supposed to give an invasive procedure along the midline to be able to maintain the suture. And at the same time, immediately after leveling alignment of lower arch, then we have to design the second stage surgery. That was terrible. So first thing is we have to make sure of the maximum transverse expansion, whether it's a surgical or non-surgical. It had to be surgical for this particular case, but then again, we still have to address the anteroposterior problem for the procline lower incisor. Then I decide to retract the lower incisor backward by root movement. So this way, I was able to avoid the second stage surgery, aligning the suture. Have a look at that. First stage expansion was done MAR, surgical RP, and then I installed another bone RP to make sure of the suture gap between the two palatal shelves to make sure of the maximum transverse dimension. And after all, we were able to gain this decent occlusion by extracting lateral incisors in the maxilla, lower first premolars. This was possible first because we expanded maxilla maximum. The basal bone expansion was as big as 10mm. And also, if you have a look at the lower incisor, it's retracted not only by tipping, but also root movement, as you see. So as long as you can recruit this kind of a treatment protocol or technique, then you can avoid the second stage surgery or third stage surgery as much as possible. Rule number 6, you will have to know how to manipulate the lower incisor when it comes to serious class 3. Finally, 22-year-old man, terrible crowding, arch length discrepancy was as big as 16mm, and we did diagnose a major transverse problem in this particular case. So I would definitely try to expand the maxilla. I'm a human being, and as you see, if you imagine transverse decompensation in the lower arch, if you couple the decompensated lower arch to the initial maxillary model, you will easily see this, leveling alignment will create a very serious transverse problem. That's what really happened in the lower arch. So we would have to address the maxilla ahead of time. I did it. I didn't gain suture separation. Then what am I supposed to do? Then we'll have to move on to extra slow expansion, because this time we entirely have to rely on bone formation on the buccal plate, which is risky and dangerous, but we still have some hope. We really have to slow down the expansion so as to gain some development of the transverse dimension just like that. The reason why I'm telling you is this, even if you fail maxillary expansion, you are not frustrated. Suture separation is just a shortcut to transverse correction, but even if it fails, instead of going directly to the SARP, we can still try something like extra slow expansion, and then maximum amount of extra slow expansion will be as big as 5 to 6 millimeter. And in this particular case, increasing the intermolar width was as big as 7.5 millimeter. The only thing is, it takes time because we don't want to waste our time. We will definitely expect suture separation, but even if it fails, there's still something that we can do. How about the stability? Very fortunately, we didn't experience serious buccal dehiscence or something for the next 4 years. Rule number 7, extra slow expansion. So this is a summarization of my presentation. I think I did my best to address answer all of my questions I raised in the beginning of my presentation. Is that correct? No, it's a success, really a success. You have to consider immediate basal bone relapse, be ready for re-expansion. Is failure really a failure? You have to consider intentional interruption of expansion. Then you will expect delayed expansion. How to maximize success? You're not supposed to use bicortical meniscus. I don't know. I have no idea. CBCT cannot detect the suture fusion, so you have to give it a try. Instead of that, instead of bicortical screw, I would advise you to strengthen tooth supporting arm as much as possible. And how to deal with the final failure? You'll have to consider manipulation of the upper and lower incisor, and then you will put extra slow expansion or something like that. Was it good enough? Was it good enough? Tonight we're gonna have a very luxurious gala dinner at the Ribery Saigon. I really appreciate the organizing committee of VAO for preparing this wonderful event, and I hope you will enjoy it until the last second. Thank you very much.
Cảm ơn giáo sư Kijuli. Thank you, Professor Kijuli. And now the certification and some more gifts for you from organizing committee. I would like to invite Professor Winnie Tu Phương.